Hey guys, how's it going? Today I want to show you a couple of quick tips for editing Foley and effects, something I found useful for placing transient-based sounds like steps, gunshots or, in this case, hand claps. We all know that editing Foley can be kinda dull or tedious, a lot of repetitive actions, so with these tips I'm going to try and step up the game a little bit, make it a little more fun and a little less time consuming. I'm gonna give you 6 hacks, starting with a couple of kinda basic but still important tips, gradually increasing the difficulty and finishing off with an advanced editing technique. Seriously guys, hack number 6 is what it all comes down to, so make sure to watch this video to the end. Let's get to it. Hack 1. Use tap to transient. If you're not using tap to transient when editing Foley, one thing I can tell you is you should. In case you're unaware, tap to transient allows you to place the playhead to the next transient on a currently selected track by pressing tab. By the way, holding down Option when pressing tab takes you to a previous transient. To enable tap to transient, just activate this switch over here. Hack 2. Use markers. This one is really easy, but it's also easy to overlook. When you have series of events happening in your video, like clapping, I find it useful, before I start editing any sound, to nudge through the video frame by frame and drop markers on those frames where the sound needs to happen. It gives a really nice visual feedback. You can kinda see what you're doing, and I think just this tip alone can gradually speed up your workflow. But make sure to clean up your markers every now and then. Otherwise, your editing session will turn into a giant mess of memory locations. Hack 3. Use sync points. Sync points are another must with Foley editing. So, with tap to transient, you've learned to move your playhead to a transient. But what do you do once you're there? You place a sync point. Sync points allow you to place the clip to a playhead not by its start or end boundaries, but by a sync point that you can determine yourself. So, if I tap to this transient over here, set a sync point by pressing Command comma, locate playhead to this marker, and then hold down Ctrl-Shift and click on this region, it will slide to the marker with the sync point. So, what I can do now is cut this clip in pieces, set sync points for each of them, and by going through the markers, place each clap to where it should be. Hack 4. Quantize to grid. With your sync points set up, you can select all your clips and press Command 0 on a numpad. That will quantize these clips to the grid by sync points. So now, every clap begins exactly on a frame. Even though that's not what you always want with Foley editing, this is still a good starting point. And now you can also nudge these clips into their locations, if you don't like all of the clicking that previous hack suggests. Hack 5. Create macros. Creating macros is really useful when organizing your workflow with sound. The opportunities with this are pretty much endless. And there are quite a few things you can automate when it comes to Foley editing. It will be individual for everyone though, and you'll have to see what kind of macros you need. But as an example, for Foley editing, I have a key on my mouse that taps to transient and places a sync point, so I can do that without taking my right hand off the mouse, or changing hand position at all really, or looking down at my keyboard. Just like that, sync point is set where I need it, and I'm ready to continue editing without any interruption. This really speeds up my editing. And again, there are different ways you can set this up and use this hack. You're gonna have to see what works for you. And finally, hack number 6. Use Beat Detective. Guys, this one is massive. At first, you might be like,
"What? Beat Detective? I thought this was for music. What does it have to do with Foley?"
Well, trust me, it helps. And you don't even have to trust me actually, because you'll see for yourself in a minute. So let's pull up Beat Detective by pressing Command 8 on a numpad. If you're not familiar with Beat Detective, what you need to know about it for our purpose is that we're gonna use it for clip separation and edit smoothing. We're skipping clip conform because that only works for music. First, using Beat Detective, we're going to separate our clip into smaller portions based on transients, making each clap a separate region. Then we're going to move them into their places, and then, again using Beat Detective, we're going to fill gaps between clips and create crossfades for a smoother edit. Let's get started. First, we're gonna have to tell Beat Detective to capture selection. As you can see, it thinks in bars and beats, but we're not gonna worry about this. You also want to make sure that over here the smallest division is selected, which is 32nd note. Then we're gonna press Analyze. Set resolution to the smallest again, which is in this case sub-bits. And then drag this sensitivity slider until, like magic, these purple lines appear next to every of your transients. Now, when we press Separate, every purple line is going to turn into a cut. But before we do that, I like to set this trigger pad to 40 milliseconds, which is about 1 frame. This way, it's going to make a cut not directly where the transient is, but 40 milliseconds earlier, which in most cases sounds more natural and will help with crossfading these clips later on. Press Separate and close Beat Detective for now. As you can see, it worked as expected. Cuts are made 1 frame before the transients, and most importantly, every transient now has a sync point. Next step, we're going to move these claps into their places. Here you have 2 options. You can go with clicking on markers and then Ctrl-Shift clicking on your regions, or you can quantize them to grid and nudge. Or you can quantize, switch to relative grid and drag. This really is up to you. Okay, now these clips are in their places, and the only thing left to do is edit smoothing. Let's pull up Beat Detective again and go to a corresponding tab over here. Select everything, click on Capture Selection, choose Fill and Crossfade, and the crossfade length is up to you. We're all set. Click Smooth. As you can see, Beat Detective has done its work beautifully. We could also add fade in and fade out. Guys, using Beat Detective may seem overwhelming at first, but give it a try and I promise you'll love it. So, that's my 6 Foley and effects editing hacks, you guys. Give this workflow a go, see if you like it. Even though you don't have to use the exact technique I've shown in this video, these are handy tools to have in your toolbox, and I'm sure you will come up with ways to make a good use of them. So give this video a like if you could learn something new, or give it a dislike if you thought it was a waste of time. And I see you guys later. Happy editing and good luck with your projects!